Hey everyone, now we're recording.
Is that a tattoo with the Tellor logo?
No tattoos with the Tellor logo yet. Uh, yeah, we got to succeed a little bit more before I get a Tellor tattoo. Um, Eventually, though, I would love to get one.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, so this is the Tellor Tech Call, um, March 24th, 2020. Um, Let me know if you guys can hear me okay, or if there's any sound problems, because as you guys can see, we're not in our normal location. Coming to you from my basement, so. Uh, this is gonna be a little bit different than a lot of the calls. Um, Usually we do kind of just a usually we do longer updates and then kind of an AMA session, but today we're gonna do a little bit of a deep dive into the ACS, which is our alternate chain system. So it'll be a little bit more technical. For kind of the quick updates, so since the last week, not a whole lot has happened. Luckily, crypto prices have sort of stabilized, which is awesome. Um, the big news, if you guys saw, so it looks like sometime shortly, F2 Pool is going to be launching their Tellor implementation. So any of you GPU miners will be able to go and mine with F2 Pool. Um, as always, pools are centralized services, so be careful which one you use. Yeah, luckily, F2 Pool is one of the bigger ones, so they kind of have a good name and reputation behind them. But there are a bunch of other Tellor pools popping up. Um, just be careful out there, especially if they require any sort of staking, or they um, you're kind of submitting things on your own, you can get slashed. So even pool operators, be very careful. It's not quite as simple as some of the other pool implementations. So that said, hopefully we can kind of increase our difficulty as all these new pools hop online, and we can get just a better Tellor system in general. Other tech things, so Tellor.fund is up and live. Tellor.fund is our crowdfunding site. So there are some community kind of agendas that you can put forward on there. If you have something that you'd want to put up there, let me know. The current ones we have up there are to join the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance. It's a $3,000 price tag for a year membership, and if you guys want to see us join that, you can signal that intent by donating to the cause. Right now, it would be we're we're not sort of against helping fund any of these, but we want to see what you guys think about some of these initiatives. The other one that's currently up there is a nice little one that I think we can definitely get to, which is an InterAxis video. So InterAxis, they did a little review on Tellor before, and they offered to do a video review on Tellor for about $200. So it's a nice cheap one. They're friends of the project. They're really nice guys. They're really just about educating the space. So if you want to go fund that one, donate a TRB or two, go over there. You can. We're hoping to see that one close by the end of the week, and then we can get the video out hopefully shortly. Other things, we'll put a link. If you guys are a developer and want to do work on some bounties, let us know. A lot of fun things, whether or not you're just bored and want to do some research on Tellor, you want to write some documentation, you want to write some articles, or even just test out using Tellor and help us kind of hash some of those things out. We'd love to see what you guys want to do, and we're happy to kind of donate some TRB to the cause. So cool. That's kind of it for the announcements. We're busy, so if you look at our GitHub, kind of in dev land, I'm working on the ACS here. So I'm really focusing on trying to get this up and running so we can implement on other chains and be really just ready to go whenever the opportunity presents itself. So the alternate chain system, that's kind of what we have dubbed it. Why is the first question you guys should be asking. So if you guys know Tellor, as you all do know, Tellor is deployed on Ethereum. So we have miners that submit data directly onto Ethereum. This is really great for applications that run on top of Ethereum. The data is easily accessible, but as many of you know, there are more chains than just Ethereum. Ethereum is by far the most popular and most used chain, especially for DeFi apps that kind of need oracles, but we don't know if that's going to be the future. It could very well be that some other chains overtake it. Um, Kind of at the end of the call, we'll talk about some of the other chains and which ones we're looking at, and kind of what we're looking to see. But the general thing is that a lot of other chains have approached us. A lot of you guys have approached us about getting and working with other chains, and we're trying to make that happen. So that's what this is about. Um, Now, some people, other systems, say like a chain link or even a band or something which isn't native to Ethereum, it's really easy to move to other chains. You sort of just point where you're sending the data to a different chain. With Tellor, it's really different because you can't just redeploy the entire Tellor system over on another chain. So say Cosmos, for instance, if there was an app that needed Tellor, we couldn't just take the entire Tellor system. Even if they do support smart contracts with Solidity, you wouldn't want to just port over the entire Tellor system. And the reason is with proof of work systems, usually, not usually, all the time, if you deploy something with the exact same algorithm on two different chains, and now your miners are sort of competing against each other, you basically just cut your hash power in half. And you don't want to do that. So we didn't, you don't really want to have two proof of work chains where your miners and kind of the GPU power or, later FPGA or ASIC power is competing against each other. You want it to all sort of be cohesive and provide some security. And that was kind of the basis of what we wanted to happen through this. Any alternate chain system that we developed, we wanted it to not take away from the security of Tellor's main system. So that was kind of caveat number one. The other things are, we wanted a system that you didn't have this completely separate entity that, it had nothing to do with the Tellor ecosystem, because we have a strong community. We have a nice group of miners out there. We want, we have software built into the mining system, even for just maintaining the database, that we want to be able to port over. We don't want something completely separate. So we wanted to add value to Ethereum Tellor, and we also want to sort of increase security on Ethereum Tellor through whatever alternate chain system we implement. And for those of you guys that don't know, shocking number of people have asked, like, well, why don't you just have the other chain read data from the Ethereum smart contract? And this would be the perfect scenario, is if, every chain could come and read from Ethereum, and it just blows up the demand on our Ethereum smart contract. But the problem there is that other chains can't read Ethereum data. And that's because to another chain, Ethereum is simply off-chain data. And in order to read off-chain data, they need, you guys guessed it, an oracle. So they can't just read Ethereum data. They need to have a system that's sort of native to their own thing that incentivizes data to be put on there. And the other reason you wouldn't want to, so, as a lot of you guys know, Tellor is kind of slow. But even with talking about other chains, Ethereum is actually relatively slow. Ethereum, doesn't do a whole lot of transactions per second. Whereas if you look at some of these side chains, say like Amatic or even like Cosmos, a lot of these have much, much faster systems in place. So you can actually build things hopefully better, or hopefully, just a little bit different to take advantage of some of what they're going after. And if you have some of these other systems, they might be set up for one type of data. So on Matic, they're going after, I think they're going after gaming, for instance. If they're going after gaming, which is, say, a lower value information that they want to be pulled on chain, they shouldn't have to be competing in requests with, say, DeFi applications on Ethereum, which will be much larger and able to pay higher fees. You want the systems to sort of be segregated, but you also want the security to sort of be pooled. So hopefully that makes sense to you guys. So, and the last kind of point with anything that we build, obviously we want it to fit with our kind of ethos of decentralization. Throughout this whole thing, this is why we believe in the space in general. It's that we want to build things that make sense. We want to enable censorship resistance. We want to enable decentralization, and which chains we partner with and the systems that we build on top of them should also fit that. So, we're not going to just go put some centralized, we could easily just go, run a centralized backend that transfers all data from Ethereum over there, or, just instantly allows requests and gives it to the other chain. But we don't want to do that. We want it to be these decentralized ecosystems, preferably the Tellor ecosystem. That sort of is one that takes off. So that's kind of the motivation and why we didn't just redeploy Tellor. So now I'm going to show you guys how it works. So I do apologize, we don't have a better whiteboard and it's a little bit small, but it's basically just there for you guys to look at. So you don't have to look at me, I'm going to explain everything. So the first piece, we'll use Cosmos as a base example because they seem to be one of the bigger chains. But Cosmos, Binance Chain, Matic, Harmony, they're all relatively similar in these senses. Whenever it comes to getting over there, the first question would be, okay, how do we get over there? So we want to support the Tellor ecosystem. So that means we need Tellor tokens on their network. This is actually a really hard problem, but luckily they know this. They know that other ERC20 tokens want to go over on their network. And so what a lot of these projects have done is they've built these token bridges. So you take your ERC20 tokens over here on ETH and you send them over to this alternate chain. And that's where, so you basically lock all of your ETH in one smart contract, and then it mints a new, Cosmos Tellor token over here. And then in order to unlock it in Ethereum, you have to basically burn it over on Cosmos, and it transfers back and forth. Now, some chains, some newer chains, we might have to handle that and come up with a way to bridge our tokens over there in order to support them. But the vast majority of the larger chains are already building these token bridges kind of native even into their systems because they realize how meaningful it is to be kind of interoperable with Ethereum, at least from a ability to swap tokens back and forth. So that's the first kind of prerequisite that's needed, but you would put Tellor tokens over on this alternate chain. And by the way, I'm assuming you guys have a knowledge of the current Tellor system. If you don't, raise your hand or shout at me. But what parties would do then, similar to the normal Tellor system, is they would take these Tellor tokens and they would stake them. This would be a much lower staking amount, say, 100 TRB, or it could even be lower. It just all sort of depends on what use cases and what the specifics of the chain are. Now, so once they stake them over here on this alternate chain, it would be in our Tellor smart contract. Like I said, we don't want to do proof of work. So instead of doing proof of work, we're just going to do proof of stake. We're going to randomly select which parties are staked, get to report. We'll select 5 miners, still calling them miners, and they will get to report on the requested value. So you could have somebody will come to the system and say, hey, I want the price of Bitcoin. The system will randomly select 5 miners from within that group of, all of those staked parties. And then those 5 parties will then report what they think the price of Bitcoin is. Now, the cool thing about this, if it's not proof of work, it can be very, very fast. Especially on some of these chains that have, second block times, for instance. Somebody can request data, the 5 miners that are running the program instantly submit it, they get a price, we can handle it a lot faster, which is really cool. Now, some of the problems, some of the edge cases. What happens if one of these 5 miners goes offline? Well, then we would just we are adding the ability to reselect the miners. So if only 2 miners report, after, depending on the speed of the chain, say 10 seconds, it reselects 3 new validators and adds them to the list until it's filled. It's a pretty simple concept. But the question should be, where does the security come from? And like Tellor, the security comes from the ability to dispute these. So you can see here down in this purple box that you guys probably can't really read, um, the median of the 5 submitted values is going to be the official Tellor value. Similar, that way you have to break kind of three out of 5 slots. But let's say this guy was a malicious value. He can get disputed, similar to Tellor. And this is sort of where it comes in. Now it goes into a little bit of a caveat, because this is where it's different. See, in Tellor, on the main chain, who gets to vote on any dispute? The answer is anybody who holds a Tellor token. This is great, but the problem on sidechain is that it can't read who's holding a Tellor token over on Ethereum. So it's only people who are holding Tellor tokens over on this alternate chain. And this is one of the sort of limitations, is that it's going to be sort of a weaker network until we sort of have really fast ability to transfer tokens back and forth, and at least information about them, which is kind of on our roadmap. Because it's going to be reporters, everyone who's over here on this chain gets to vote. And the reason that we really we do want it that way in a lot of ways, because we want this chain to have ownership of this data, if that makes sense. We don't want, there's going to be a whole bunch of different tellers, theoretically. So the people who should ultimately be able to say what a right or wrong value is are the people who are actually using that value. So we'd expect that the parties that are using it would be the ones that are voting. How we incentivize that, love some more ideas too. So yeah, so that's anybody who has Tellor over here on this alternate chain gets to vote on whether or not it was right or wrong. And now here's another difference from the main chain, and this is actually, I think I hinted at it kind of in the Tellor call, or on the Tellor channel. This is something we're looking at implementing in V2. So right now, the way it works in Tellor is that we have one vote that decides whether or not it's right or wrong. This is good. We have a way of disputing things, but it's also limiting, because now it puts everything on one vote, which could potentially be, gamed by some whale. The way that the alternate chain system is going to work, and eventually all Tellor, is that we're moving to multiple dispute rounds. So this was actually an idea. Augur does this very well, but we're gonna really speed up what Augur does. So the first round, you're gonna pay a small amount to dispute, say 2 TRB or some, depending on the stake amount on the given chain, and it's only going to be a 1-day vote. It's going to be very, very fast. If that vote passes, then that's great. If everybody agrees with it, that'll be the end of it. But let's say nobody voted on that chain. Nobody voted on that dispute, so it had a 0.5% voting rate, and the bad value still got through. You can actually dispute the dispute. So you'll say that broke, and you'll have to pay double the amount. So if it costs 2 TRB to dispute the original value, now it's going to cost 4 TRB, and it's also going to be twice as long. So now it's going to be a 2-day vote. And if that one has a little bit better, good. But if the bad value still gets through, you can dispute it again, and you can theoretically do infinite disputes. And the reason that we wanted to do this was, especially since it's only the tokens on the alternate chain. If they Tellor, our Multi's wallet or other holders, we care about this other chain, you can transfer some tokens over and help with the vote. You can just continuously push it out until hopefully it's a non-issue, and that's going to be some of the security features, because whenever you think about what actually adds security to a lot of these blockchain systems, it's this sort of this non-finality that's going to bring a lot of security. And now, if you were the person that requested this Bitcoin US dollar price, you don't have to wait until all of these disputes are done. So you would dispute, this person would be put into quarantine or or on lockdown, and you would just go request it again. It's going to be relatively cheap. And then you would just get the price the next block. You wouldn't have to wait for the dispute process to go through. Uh, so they would literally need to just break all of the stakers, but that would be hopefully prohibitively expensive. Um, but that's something that you can actually measure, similar to the Tellor system. It's obviously possible to buy up 51% of our market cap and vote disputes through. We know that that's an attack vector, but you assume that people aren't doing that. It's just one of those things, or at least you can measure the cost. So, you'll know on this alternate chain, hey, it's going to cost, we can secure something up to a $5 million value, $10 million value, depending on how long you want to secure it for. So, yeah, so that's kind of the flow of the ACS. So some of the other changes that we're making to the contracts. So one of the bigger ones that we're making is that there's going to be no upgradability in these contracts, since you have to stake over here and then send your token to the Tellor contract. If we want to make an upgrade to one of these contracts, we'll just redeploy a new Tellor contract and tell you to go stake over there. It's one of those things that we debate even at the Tellor level on Ethereum, whether or not you want kind of upgradability in your contracts. And we've obviously used it here in the Tellor Ethereum world. And, we don't regret doing that. It's just one of those things that, from kind of a design decisions and just to kind of keep it simpler over there, we're going to take out the upgradability. The other thing that you have to know about these pieces is that one of the main issues you should be thinking is, okay, well, how do you incentivize data providers to go over there? Because right now, if you guys know Tellor, there's not a whole lot of tips on the Tellor network. So, people ideally would be paying for the data on Tellor. That's not really happening right now, because it's now, if you just go request and you don't even pay a tip, you'll probably get mined within a few blocks on Tellor. But eventually we expect that to go up. The only reason people are doing it now on the main chain is that we have inflationary rewards. So you guys know we had that whole inflation upgrade thing beginning of the month. That's why people are mining right now. People are mining solely in order to get those block rewards. Well, there's no block rewards over here, so we can't mint you can't mint Ethereum tokens from another chain. Well, you might be able to. At least the current plan is we're not going to. If you want data and you want to pay somebody to go get it, then you pay them to go get it. So these 5 miners will just be splitting sort of whatever somebody tips. And that's kind of the big difference in the Tellor contracts. So from day one, it's kind of putting the onus on the users to actually pay for the data they want. And since it's proof of stake, there's no proof of work, smaller sort of staking requirement, it should be cheaper. You shouldn't have to pay a whole lot. And especially if you're on one of these faster chains, this could be a lot of data requests, hopefully. So that's why we think it could still be a very viable situation. But at the same time, inflation rewards are really powerful things for adding security to the network. If you add inflation rewards over here, now all of a sudden a whole bunch of people are going to want to go over here and try and get the rewards. So that's one thing that we have to sort of debate as a community. I think in the long run, we'll just have to see where demand comes from for Tellor. If eventually, say, no one likes us on Ethereum ever, and no one ever wants to adopt Tellor on Ethereum, but everyone on Cosmos is using Tellor. Maybe we want to shift to bringing the inflationary rewards over to Cosmos. Or maybe we want to bring the inflationary rewards somewhere else. That's sort of a decision as use cases come on board. But it's something that you can sort of change with the contract. So just keep that in mind, that right now the security is sort of minimal, but it's going to be limited by the use case. And then I told you another thing. So this is another teaser for V2, and this one we're going to want some feedback on. It's a little bit more fun. So we're actually going to take out the request data piece. If you guys know in Tellor, what you do if you want a new piece of data from Ethereum or on the Ethereum chain, what you would do is you would submit kind of the API string, and you would submit, the symbol. So say it's like JSON API.coinbase.com or whatever it is, um, and how to get it, and then we store all that information on chain. So what data you're going to go get is actually stored on chain, and we're actually going to get rid of that. We're going to move to just all data is specified off chain. So if you request ID1, the way that the miner knows what ID1 is isn't because of some on-chain database. It's just because all of the miners know that that's what ID1 is. And it's moving some of the security from kind of on-chain, everything specified, to off-chain, which is going to be our future node, which is going to be the miners. So it kind of goes into what Tellor wants to be in the future. Because if you're trying to specify all of the data on chain, it gets very expensive to do, especially just to do a whole lot. You can do basic API calls, but we've kind of struggled with that because the general idea is that Tellor, we don't want to be just this platform where people can do generalized API calls to their smart contracts. We want to be something that provides more specific, useful data on Ethereum. And I drew this little picture over here, and the way that it'll probably work is you're going to have it's going to be this peer-to-peer network of Tellor miners, and they all have a database. So the database is going to be, you can think of more advanced things like the volume weighted average prices, the time weighted average prices. You can have a whole list of exchanges. You can even have manual inputs, and they're going to gossip them back and forth. So it's going to be more a thing of like a torrent network. So you won't need to just rely on these APIs. You can rely on some other things. It's going to be a little bit more censorship resistance, and that's what we want Tellor to be eventually. And then what they're going to do is then they'll submit it to these various chains. So you don't have to specify what each thing is. It basically is what the network agrees it is. So if you're just going to request ID1, all of the miners who are sort of part of our network know that that means ETH US dollar. They're going to submit this specific ETH US dollar price on chain. And if you don't know what that is, you're going to get disputed because you're going to submit a bad value. So that's going to be how we incentivize it. But moving it off chain is going to allow us just to do a whole lot more, just adding in just complete customization into what each piece of data means. It's going to be really exciting, especially some of the things that we'll be able to create whenever we do this. That said, if you guys want to work with me on the peer-to-peer server for the Tellor miner, let me know. That's been kind of my side project here. So that's one thing that we're also looking to do in the V2 Tellor. So that, gentleman and lady, I think Brenda's the only lady here, that is the Tellor alternate chain system. So the next question, obviously, for you guys would be, okay, well, what chains are you going to be deploying this on? And we don't know, to be honest. So since there's no minting rewards over there. Most of these other chains, so we've talked to Harmony, we've talked to Cosmos, we've talked to Matic, we've talked to Echo, we've talked to Binance Chain, and a million others. You can have on there just, this comes into our philosophy. You can have, we can have a partnership agreement now that says we're serving their chain, but we want to talk to their users. We want to find out what they need. We want to go over there when there's a user, because if there's no users, there's no point in people going and staking their tokens over there because nobody's going to be requesting data. So, we want to go over there when there's a user. It's also every kind of chain that we support. You know, especially as you look at all these other oracles, just because they're supporting another chain does not mean that that actually adds value to their token, unless it actually means users buying their tokens to submit for data, or there's some feedback mechanism to where it leads to value being accrued to the ecosystem. It should be seen as actually a negative that you're supporting these other chains, because every new chain that you support is just more workload for your developers. So that's, you know, if we have to sort of monitor and track all of the different miners, all of the different security pieces on all these different networks, we want to make sure that it's actually being used. We want to make sure that people really sort of need the data that's being provided, and honestly, they're willing to pay for it. So that kind of in a nutshell is what we're looking for as far as what chain we deploy on top of. So, you know, the things that we can use your guys' help with is, it's not even connecting us to other chains. It's what users on other chains can you connect us to? Because I think a lot of these other chains, um, they're sort of functioning in the fact that they're another chain, but they're not functioning in the fact that they have users on their chain. Um, you know, they're trying to get oracles and everyone over there to build all these tools, but you need the ultimate end app before it even makes sense for us to want to go over there. So, all right, we have some questions. For moving tokens from one blockchain to another, have you looked at existing solutions like Interledger protocol? And if so, could this be used? Yeah, so Interledger protocol is super cool. We actually did a lot of research with our research grants. We got an Ethereum Foundation research grant back in early 2018, and it was to look at using oracles to bridge different chains. To be honest, we don't really need to do that, because most of the chains we talk to have kind of built-in ways to do it, which is awesome. You know, like we know that we could use something, say like Interledger protocol, or there's a lot of other solutions out there, but most of them have a standard way already built in. So, you know, like the easiest way obviously is like Matic. So it's a side chain, a plasma side chain on Ethereum. It's sort of natively built in. Cosmos has a way that they've built. So there's a lot of these standard ways that we won't have to sort of reinvent the wheel, and that's going to be really nice because they'll be the ones kind of supporting all of that infrastructure. Number two, whenever a smart contract on ACS gets upgraded, since it's not upgradable, how long does a user have to move their tokens to a new one? So this is still one of those questions that we don't know. How long it takes you to move your tokens in and out of this is going to be a question. Hopefully you don't have too many upgrades. You know? I think that's the big thing. Usually, so it would be how long we sort of require you to be staked for. Usually, you know, in the main Tellor system, withdrawals are 1 week. You could probably make it much faster here, say like a day. So you wait a day and then you can move it over. But so it's not, you know, this isn't one of these staking systems where like all you do is you stake here and you get rewarded. No, like you actually have to do things. You have to go run a node and submit data. Like if you're not, the only people who are getting paid anything over here are the 5 people who report. So you're going to have to be running something. So it's, you know, we want people who are actively engaged and going to be running these data nodes and moving data around. So, number 3, what's the incentive for validator nodes on ACS if they do not get any rewards from the inflation? And that's where it comes in. These guys are going to have to pay to request data. So they tip a quarter and it gets split. Everybody makes 5 cents for submitting a transaction. On most of these networks, transactions are roughly free. So, you know, that's going to be the cost that you have to sort of bear in here. And that's going to be one of those things. I think, you know, the way that we're looking to kickstart these, we're talking with the other chains. You could do, say, a grant. So if you get a grant from them, you could use, say, the grant, the first month goes to kind of rewards on the network for these. Number 4, last question here, what's the roadmap for storing data off-chain rather than on-chain? So a lot of the data already is stored off-chain. So if you know the first 50 we have, we're request IDs in Tellor. The first 50 are set aside for solely specified off-chain. We call them PSRs. That's basically all that's being used now anyway. We're just going to take off the ability for anything but PSRs. So we're already storing it off-chain. We're actually just going to be kind of boosting out the ability of what the off-chain pieces mean. Right now the off-chain pieces just sort of mean some other pieces. Right now the off-chain. Sorry, I got a question and then I got lost. Right now the off-chain pieces are just basic API calls, but we want to make them a lot more robust because that's one of the things that's really needed in this space. So you see like all of these derivatives contracts and they'll settle to just like last traded price, which is just an awful idea. So, rather than just being sort of this generalized data provider, which we want to be, we also want to sort of spoon feed a lot of these DeFi protocols calls some more robust numbers. So you use things like TWAPs and VWAPs, and that's yeah, that's what you're going to have to do, and we want to just create them for other people so that way they don't need to make their own or guess, because people just are lazy and then they don't, and they rely on things like Uniswap prices or something like that. And from Paul, he writes, why not just give ACS nodes some of the inflation rewards? Why resist? So I think eventually, we might put some inflation rewards over there. That's more of like a monetary policy decision down the road. But I'm not solely convinced that a lot of these other chains are going to survive. So you want the inflationary rewards, maybe eventually as Tellor can pass data back and forth, you'd love like the inflationary rewards are split kind of equivalent to the data amount that's requested and the demand. But at the moment, saying you're going to give 10% of your inflationary rewards over to this network that has 0 users, or it's kind of a tough sell. I don't want to limit which chains we can go on by needing to push them some inflation rewards. It's like, and I think it sort of puts the onus on them. Like we want to come support your chains, but we want your users to actually want the data. I think even with Tellor on the main chain in Ethereum, like you want some inflation rewards and you want to pay for things, but ultimately what we eventually are going to need is people actually paying for data. The argument comes down even in like Bitcoin and Ethereum. It's how do you actually get people to pay for things? Bitcoin, people are actually paying for transactions. But once the block reward goes away, will people pay for will people pay the amount necessary to keep it secure? It's a big question. Ethereum seems to be doing a lot better. It seems like people will pay those high gas prices. So yeah, I don't know about if inflation rewards on the other chain is what's going to make it successful or not. And he countered, he said, isn't this the bootstrapping phase? It can be the bootstrapping phase, but that's why I think like even getting I'd be willing even to give a small portion of the dev fund or something if you have an actual user over there, versus sort of complicating it with the inflationary rewards. It shouldn't be too difficult to push some of the other stuff over there. It's and then we also want to limit inflation. So you don't want, obviously you could just like double the inflation rate and push it on to another chain, but then we just reduce the inflation rate. We don't want to double the inflation rate on another chain. We want to, hopefully every chain adds to the value, because now you're taking kind of tokens off of Ethereum, you're locking them up here. This is adding to kind of the scarcity of Tellor tokens on Ethereum. It's theoretically increasing, the scarcity and thus the security of the system. And that's why every alt-chain system that we add that actually gets people to lock these up and gets miners who will theoretically be running nodes, and all of these nodes are going to be talking to each other, passing data back and forth, whether you're mining on Ethereum, Cosmos, on Harmony. So every chain you add, if it does bring more nodes on, you're going to actually get more security and more robustness in your protocol. And that's ideally what we want. So, all right. Yeah, so that's about it. We're really looking for, um, yeah, really looking for ideas as far as which chains to go on. So if you guys have things over, um, you know, if you guys have preferences, we want to find it. I think the other piece that I didn't mention, which chains we're looking at, we want them to fit our ethos. There's a lot of chains out there that just, they're centralized and they're going to stay centralized likely. So, you will go over there if they give us a nice grant or something like that, but it's we want to build things that actually make sense. And that's why we're doing this. So, trying to find some other chains that also support decentralization as much as we do. It's a good thing. So, any other questions? No? All right. So the next tech call will be in 1 month. And we'll be doing Tellor V2, which is going to be a really fun one. So things that you guys can look forward to, probably tomorrow, we're going to, maybe later today, I don't know. We're going to be publishing an Oracle's best practice article. Definitely go read that. And we'll also be publishing the V2 kind of overview white paper coming out probably next week. So stay tuned. Thanks for everyone joining. Talk to you guys later.